This week, we have a defining moment in world history, a moment that's going to determine whether or not we're going to have governments throughout the world or whether we're going to have a single world government in the name of trade. That's the way it's coming to us. We've talked many times about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Partnership. This week, we will see whether or not they're going to fast track a trade promotion authority. That's what they're calling it. This is something that, if we could take a historical analogy, I think is very much like the moment at Runnymede, where the nobility forced the Magna Carta on the king. It was really a recognition that power had already transferred. They put this before him and they said, sign it. At that point, power was devolved from that monarchical king to a small oligarchy. And it continued to devolve for a while. We had democratic republics. We even had a constitutional republic that was created with a sovereign treaty between 13 sovereign states. Now we have a treaty, the first one that's coming up, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is being brought up. It is 12 nations. It will be one of the largest trading blocs we have. I think it includes about 40% of the world's economies. This is, however, nothing but a secret corporate takeover, being negotiated in secret, and it is a secret corporate takeover. Make no doubt about it. That's what Joseph Stiglitz calls it. He says, such pacts like this used to be called free trade agreements. In fact, they were always managed trade agreements. They were tailored to corporate interests. They were largely in the U.S. and the European Union. Today, such deals are more often referred to as partnerships, as in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But they are not partnerships of equals. No, actually, as he points out, perhaps the most invidious, most dishonest part of this agreement is investor protections. This is not something new. This is not something that we haven't seen before. Of course, we saw this with NAFTA. We saw not only the removal of jobs from the United States, the loss of over 600,000 jobs after we'd been promised the gain of 200 within just a couple of years. No, we have seen about 600,000 jobs lost. We have also seen how these state investor arbitrations work out. There have been literally several hundred of them, not only in the European Union, but also in the NAFTA Union. And as they refer to them, they don't talk about them as being arbitrations. They talk about them as being investment treaty claims. And that's a key point here. When you look at the loss of sovereignty, the initial step towards world government, it's not just an agreement. You know, language means a great deal, and it's not just an agreement. We're going to talk a bit more about the difference between an agreement and a treaty. But first of all, what's going to happen? Well, last week we had a filibuster by the Democrats that was shut down on Thursday. They moved to for cloture to go to a vote. And Mitch McConnell says that's going to happen this week. He says, yes, we will pass it. We will pass it later this week, he said today. And of course, he's talking about the fast track legislation. They are simply going to give Congress an up or down vote. Now, if this was a treaty, it would require 67 votes in the Senate. If it's going to be in the fast track trade authorization that they give with the Trade Promotion Authority, it will be a simple up or down vote. So instead of 61 votes to pass this, it will only need 51 in the Senate. But of course, they're going to throw in the House for good measure, except the House is overwhelmingly in support of it, as are the Republicans. It's pretty much breaking down along party lines, unfortunately, although the leadership of both parties is very heavy to do this. They will then have, as part of the fast track, 2 weeks to show us this secret agreement that they have been working with. Corporate lawyers have been putting this together for several years now. And so just like the Magna Carta, the king had not written that. The king had not seen that. This was not a negotiation. This was something that was already written. They came to him and they said, sign it. We have the power. That is what's going on here. For years, they've been doing these trade partnerships. Now they're about to present it to the Congress and say, sign it. We're going to take your power at this point if you don't give it up. We haven't been allowed to see that. Our congressmen and senators have not been allowed to tell us about it, to take notes. They can go and read it, but they cannot talk about it. Where is the law that says that Congress cannot discuss a treaty? Now they tell us, don't worry, we're going to have 2 weeks to take a look at it. There will be no amendments, however, during that period of time. However, one of the few senators who has bothered to take a look at it, and the very few have, Jeff Sessions, looked at it and said, this is a living document. Anything that is put in there can be changed at will by the same secret process that we've seen to create this in the first place. So there will be no amendments by the Congress. Yet once it passes, it can be amended forever, continuously, by other people. They are surrendering their authority. And of course, we had an article about a week ago by Phyllis Schlafly that was originally on WND. TPP trade deal, Congress is giving away its authority. Precisely, that is what they're doing. They will not be allowed to amend it. It'll be an up or down vote, and then it can be amended at will by whoever the trade authorities are, whoever is in authority with that at that point. Now, she also talks about, again, going back to this being a treaty. She says, by not calling it a treaty, even though it involves 12 countries on 3 continents, the globalists induced the Senate to abandon the 67-vote threshold for a treaty ratification, even the 60-vote threshold they usually use for important legislation. Now, let me ask you, is this a treaty or is it an agreement? Let me read you the definition of what a treaty is. A treaty is a formal agreement negotiated between 2 or more nations in reference to peace, commerce, or other international relations. That is precisely what this is. This is a treaty. And as I mentioned, in investor-state relations that are going on now within the EU as well as within NAFTA, they talk about it being treaty claims and international investor treaty claims in this arbitration court. They know full well that it's a treaty. They play games with the language as always. If you want another analogy besides the Magna Carta, take a look at the enabling acts that put Adolf Hitler in absolute control in 1933. At that point in time, the Reichstag, which was the legislative body in the Weimar Republic, voted to hand over all legislative power to Adolf Hitler. They basically just gave it away. Our Congress has been doing that with the bureaucracies, but they're going to give away not only trade agreements, and as we pointed out, this is not a free trade agreement, this is managed trade. It is not free market, it is crony capitalism, just like the bank bailouts, just like the mortgage scams that we saw. It is law that is being written in secret by corporations and handed to the Congress and say, sign away your power. And it appears that they're ready to do so. Now, one of the other things that we learned in this process is that this is not simply going to be for these 2 trade agreements. This is going to run for 6 years. It will give that authority to subsequent presidents, and that's why Mitch McConnell can barely contain his glee, talking about how he and Obama are now good buddies, passing back and forth secret notes. Well, you know, there's a lot of secret notes that are passing back and forth between them and these corporations probably, and some of those notes are colored green, I think. Finally, this comment about treaties. This is, in fact, a treaty, and in preparation for this, we have an article from Conservative Tribune that says, this is unreal. The Obama administration says that treaties trump the U.S. Constitution. There are many aspects of this treaty that are not about trade, that are about sovereignty, and this is one of them, saying that this is a treaty and not an agreement, in their words. Now, we have a case going on right now with the Justice Department arguing this very fact. As the Washington Examiner pointed out, the Justice Department attorneys are advancing an argument at the Supreme Court right now that could allow the government to invoke international treaties as a legal basis for policies like gun control that conflict with the U.S. Constitution, according to Senator Ted Cruz. Their argument is that a law implementing an international treaty signed by the U.S. allows the federal government to prosecute a criminal case that would normally be handled by state or local authorities. Now, you understand that even if there isn't any language in there about gun control, it can always be added at a later date. We just pointed out that this is a living document. And of course, if it's guns that are passing across borders, they could very easily say that that is an item of trade. And if the Obama administration is successful in arguing before the Supreme Court that treaties supersede the Constitution, we're going to have a very difficult time with this. One last article to show you how bad this is. As they're giving carte blanche to the multinational corporations to do as they wish, we now see that Congress is about ready to crack down on homemade soap. They have an act called the Personal Care Products Safety Act. This would give the Food and Drug Administration authority to regulate ingredients in personal care products, not only for the big name brand ones that are made by big companies and that go across state lines, but also for homemade products like all-natural soap that are made in home businesses across America. You see, if they were watching the Constitution, paying any attention at all to it, then they would not have the authority to do that. They would only have the authority to regulate personal care products that travel across state boundaries. That's the way the Constitution is written, but we don't pay any attention to that anymore. And this illustrates the fact that they are going to come down with a hammer on all of the small national businesses. This is about giving everything to the multinational corporations and taking everything from us. Well, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about Bank of America's dire predictions. They say we're in a twilight zone. Grab your cash, grab your gold. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
From the water table to our soils to the atmosphere itself, our world is becoming more and more toxic each and every day. But it's not just the air outside that's toxic. Indoor air has been shown to have 2 to 5 times higher concentrations of pollutants than even outdoor air. And most Americans spend 90% of their time inside using toxic chemicals within their homes. There are more than 42 million smokers in the United States. Well over 1,000 types of mold and mildew linked to numerous conditions. And don't forget the fact that 6 million Americans live with pets they're allergic to as well. When I began to research these statistics, it was clear to me it was time to start cleansing my lungs in order to combat the toxic environment that we cannot escape, but that we can fight back against. Made with organic and wild cultivated herbs and manufactured in the USA, the new InfoWars Life Lung Cleanse is here in a convenient spray bottle that can be brought with you throughout any toxic environment. Now available exclusively at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.
We will see whether or not they're going to fast track a trade promotion authority. That's what they're calling it. This is something that, if we could take a historical analogy, I think is very much like the moment at Runnymede where the nobility forced the Magna Carta on the king. It was really a recognition that power had already transferred. They put this before him and they said, sign it. At that, they were tailored to corporate interests. They were largely in the US and the European Union. Today, such deals are more often referred to as partnerships, as in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But they are not partnerships of equals. No, actually, as he points out, perhaps the most invidious, most dishonest part of this agreement is investor protections. This is not something new. This is not something that we haven't seen before. Of course, at that point, power was devolved from that monarchical king to a small oligarchy. And it continued to devolve for a while. We had democratic republics. We even had a constitutional republic that was created with a sovereign treaty between 13 sovereign states. Now we have a treaty, the first one that's coming up, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is being brought up. It is 12 nations. It will be one of the largest trading blocks we have. I think it includes about 40% of the world's economies. This is, however, nothing but a secret corporate takeover, being negotiated in secret, and it is a secret corporate takeover. Make no doubt about it. That's what Joseph Stiglitz calls it. He says, such pacts like this used to be called free trade agreements. In fact, they were always managed trade agreements. This week, we have a defining moment in world history, a moment that's going to determine whether or not we're going to have governments throughout the world, or whether we're going to have a single world government in the name of trade. That's the way it's coming to us. We've talked many times about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Partnership. This week,